Alrighty, guys. Welcome back to the third episode of the Two Guys, One Field podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing buying 40 acres and raising corn and soybeans and a mix of two on that ground. And we're going to be using a market that is competitive to where we are at in west central Ohio. We're actually probably a little below market value because there's been some farms recently sell for around $20,000 an acre around us, but we're going to go with $16,000 an acre. And I do want to disclose that we have numbers written down on our papers just because it would be hard to remember all these numbers off the top of our heads. So if you see us looking down or anything, that would be what we're looking at.
No, I mean, just trying to be below market value because obviously I say community is different. Every single one. You could go 30 miles from you in one way and go 30 miles in the opposite way, and they're completely different pricing.
Yep.
Due to, say, a bunch of animals, a bunch of investment groups, just different areas bring different pricing.
Alrighty, so we are going to start it off with the purchase. So buying 40 acres at $16,000 an acre is going to be about $640,000 totally. And we're going to assume that you're not using any equity to secure and you're going straight to the 20% down on that farm, which equates to $128,000 a year. And you are borrowing $512,000 from a bank. And we're going to use a loan of about 6.5% to 7% interest on a 30-year loan. And we're going to assume after property taxes and everything you insure, you're going to spend about $45,000 a year as an annual payment on that 40 acres.
Which, once again, this could be high for your area, but it is
or low. Comparative to Iowa and out west, it could be half what it is there in those competitive areas.
Which, disclaimer, we really have no clue what the prices are around that area. But just to give an idea out there. And, I mean, if you're putting 20% down, which not many... In this area, there's not many people putting 20% down.
Yeah, there's a lot of equity, borrowing, either a second mortgage or using a farm to secure, an old paid-for farm that you got laying around.
But yeah, it's always there's always little tweaks in different areas.
Alrighty, so we're gonna start out. In all of our projections were honestly on the safe side. Like we estimated high on your input cost, and we estimated kind of on the lower side of yields and commodity price. Like for our corn here, we've got it priced at $4.50 a bushel, where we can forward contract next year December for about $4.92. I think earlier was the number. So we're a little low, but it's easier to be conservative and see if you can actually make it happen.
Rather than overshooting yourself. Because, I mean, heck, we just got to a little over 5 this morning. I got a text from Cardinal.
Mm-hmm. So. It's a lot easier to spread yourself thin when you overestimate, your prices and your total yields. So I'm going to start it out. So on your 40 acres, we're going to assume that you raise 200 bushel corn, and like I said, at $4.50 a bushel. So that brings your revenue to about $900 an acre, or a total revenue of $36,000 across the whole 40 acres. Now, like I said, input costs, we estimated a little high, and we're going to go with $700 input, and that covers your chemistry, your seed, everything, even your 28 that you apply, when we're assuming you apply 28. And the total input cost is $28,000. So the profit before land cost is $8,000, and now you've got to subtract your land payment that you would have on an annual payment of $46,000. So you've got about a $38,000 difference that you're going to come up with, to make your land payment every year on a $16,000 farm.
Which, once again, that's definitely low, but it's conservative.
It's safe.
Enough.
It's a safe estimate, if you're trying to add that 40 acres, depending on how bad you want it.
Now, and realistically, you're going to have years where you go, say it's decent ground, say you go 280 at the high point,
which is really good. I mean, that's high.
Yeah, that's really dang good, at least for our area. And then the next year you don't get rain, or you get rained out, you can't put 28 on, or you have to plant really late. It's just, there's a bunch of factors that go into the whole yield thing. And if you wait for perfection, you will never get perfection. You might get it for a couple hours, and then it's going to rain. I mean, there's so much stuff you got to go through just to get. Everybody's going to that 300 bushel mark or the 400 if you're going in like gardens and so I don't. To each their own.
Alrighty, so that brings us. We're going to assume you're rotating your crop every year, and you're going to soybeans, which is what we factored for. And we factored a 60 bushel average of soybeans, which is a good average. That's something to strive for. And we priced it at $11.50, which, like I said, is low because you could have sold soybeans today, local to us, for around $12.15. You know, obviously that's a 65-cent difference on a load of soybeans. That adds up. And so that brings us to a total revenue of $690 an acre, or $27,600 totally. Now, your input cost of soybeans is a little lower, but also your revenues are a lot lower. So your total input cost is about $18,000 with soybeans. And that brings your profit after your land, that brings your...
Before land, it'd be $9,600, and then after is negative $36,400.
So you have a $36,500 deficit that you're going to come up with on your own income to be able to make that land payment every year. So, I mean, soybeans really aren't saving you either. It's really, either way, you know, with the safe factoring, you know you're going to have at least a $30,000 payment at the end of every year. And that's with an average yield. So, I mean, factoring for highs and lows kind of takes both into account when you average them out.
Which it definitely can get rough, and don't let this discourage you. You can make money, give or take, but that's on the years where you have yields that are out of the blue and you have great market price. There's always a gamble. It is always a gamble.
All right, now we wanted to bring in a third scenario that's not likely because it's only 40 acres, but we wanted to give you a split of corn and beans. You divided it 20 acres, 20 and 20. So your corn, using the same numbers that we factored for earlier, your profit before your land is about $400, and your profit before land on beans is about $4,800, which honestly the beans are probably factored a little bit higher than the corn relative to each other, but now you have a $37,000 payment with these numbers that you have to account for at the end of every year when you make your ground payment.
Which I can definitely agree with you on that one. The beans being at 60 bushel an acre, beans you can't really. Beans they
are more on rain. Yeah. It's not as.
You can't really factor that in. There's a bunch of stuff that goes on. And then corn being, if you're getting 60 bushel beans on that acreage at 200 bushel an acre on corn, there's something you're doing wrong on corn. But some acres like beans a lot more than they do corn. And that's just comes down to if you know your land or not.
And so now we want to break down, what this means. And all you guys in agriculture that are listening to us, you already know what this means. You're not buying this ground to cash flow it, but we want to break it down for all the people that are joining in that just enjoy two younger guys talking about ag and, something they really enjoy. So obviously you're not buying the land to cash flow it, and you're buying it hoping for appreciation, higher commodity prices, or even, some more outside income to cover it. Farming might be your side hustle, you might just enjoy doing it. And that's really what it comes down to, because especially even if you had $16 beans and almost $7 corn, you wouldn't even be close to making that farm payment, just off the commodities you could raise, which is sad. I mean,
yeah,
because we're young, we're trying to get into farming, and that's what we get to look forward to.
Yeah, the life we get to live in. All sorts of fun. Now, if you're renting, on the other hand, that is a
we're going to cover that in the next episode, what it would look like renting, different scenarios. But, for now, how are people still doing it? They either have, money they've had lying around from good times in the past. They've got equity in ground that they're used to borrow and just, average out all their total expenses to be able to buy that ground. there's a lot of outside investment nowadays in farm ground because it's getting so expensive and they're not really making any more of it. There's only so much ground you can clear, especially in farming communities already.
And now you're dealing with data centers and everybody else trying to take away from that farmland. And that always adds another fun part to it. That always adds to the price. If you're taking this 40 acres as, say, your retirement, land appreciates. Land will always appreciates, and it always will come back to it.
Farmers and investors in general, they're looking at this as a long-term investment. This probably isn't something that's going to happen in 5 to 10 years. This is more of a 25 to 30-year thing you got going on here to make your money back. But it's, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively safe investment. There's only been a few times in history where farm ground's gone down in price, and it's been really severe interest, like the 80s, for example. You had ground go from $3,500 back to $6,000 an acre just because everyone couldn't afford to have it. They were losing it to banks and stuff.
The 80s is the whole reason I actually have this house. So Grandpa bought this back in the 80s whenever he'd kept up a little bit of money back, and if you're in farming, you completely understand to keep some back for the next year.
Alrighty, so with our closing statements, we just wanted to let you know kind of what it was like, to try to buy 40 acres at a relatively good price nowadays in 2026 at $16,000 an acre, and what the numbers would look like, raising corn or beans or both on that 40 acres.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You've seen the numbers and you've seen the negative sign on both sides of it, but that doesn't mean it's a bad investment. You just got to be able to make the payment every year, which is kind of a problem that's going on for a lot of people in agriculture. That's why you see a lot of people are selling out because, there's a lot of people sell 40 acres.
You're $500,000.
Yeah,
once you. And if you're not just buying this and just starting off, that is the whole thing with...
Yeah, that's what we're trying to get into as well.
If you're renting, you're a lot better off if you're starting out, but still it is a pain.
And we'll cover that next week, but it just comes down to, factoring it all in together, But we want to hear from you guys, and we'd love to see some comments, Are you waiting out, the bad times here, waiting to invest in more ground, or... Are you buying in, because that's all you can do, and you don't know what's going to happen. So we'd love to hear from you guys. And this is Two Guys, One Field. We're back with the 3rd episode, and we appreciate it, all your support, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.